Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast, and welcome to our spoiler-free review for HBO's The Last of Us Season 2. You can't heal something unless you're brave enough to say it out loud. Welcome to the Geekcentric podcast. My name is Nate, and this is our spoiler-free review for the HBO original series, The Last of Us Season 2. Special thanks, as always, to our wonderful friends at Crave Canada and Max for letting us watch this season early for review. If you're joining us for the first time, we are Geekcentric, a podcast celebrating the world of movies, TV shows, games, and all things Geekcentric. Joining me for this spoiler-free review is my fellow survivor, because he's never left behind. He's taller than a bloater, and he's certainly an Ellie toter. He's Justin, the Joel-loving Last of Us Lawrence.
How's it going? That's my best.
Hey, kiddo.
Hey, kiddo.
That's what you're going for.
Yeah.
I don't think Joel ever says, "How's it going?"
He should.
I like it. He should. Yeah.
You know, it's a bit of Joel. It's a bit of me. You know, it's all good. This was a very interesting experience. I'm excited to finally have the proper conversation after spending the last 3 days watching these episodes together
and sort of trying to talk about it but not talk about it kind of thing.
Yeah, we were sharing our thoughts. It was a very interesting screening experience. It's a little unconventional, but it's fine. We make it work because we want to cover it, which is what I'm super excited about. So but I'm sure you're happy to not have me around with my lovely colorful commentary off to the side that really sucks it out of certain moments.
You know what? There's highs, there's positives and negatives for sure. Like any experience, shared experience.
There's a reason why we watch these things alone, though. Obviously,
sure.
Right?
I think but you know what, Justin? The positives, they outweigh the negatives for me. Dude. I always love, and especially given, and you'll hear it in this review and probably in this discussion, the differences in terms of where we're coming from with this specific story, because we both played through The Last of Us, the first game, but I've played through the second one. You've started the second one.
Correct.
I called you an Ellie toter earlier. That's a little nod from your intro from our watch club that we did for season 1, which if you're listening to this and you want to go back before you're diving into season 2, or you want to just kind of maybe have a bit of a recap, check out that watch club. There were some really good discussions, if I do say so myself, that we had. And you can even just check out the last episode if you want to kind of do a recap on season 1 before you get into season 2. But dude, we are back here. The Last of Us is back in our lives, Justin. It feels like it never left. How are you feeling?
Feeling good, man. I'm feeling it's a little heavy, but we got through it, and it's nice that it was 7 episodes. I feel like that there was we'll talk about it obviously, but like that helps with the experience of understanding, what's going on in this part 2 or season 2 of The Last of Us. So I'm feeling invigorated, if you will, even though I might be a little infected.
Goodness. So. Oh no. I got to take you out back. I think Naughty Dog re-releasing the games over and over again, it has such an impact. It had such an impact on me, but the fact that they're continuing to re-release the games on PS5 and PC, and they're making it accessible for people to explore these stories how they'd like, I think it continues to be so rad that this show is able to capture the moments from what I would argue is my favorite single player game of all time, and the way that they're able to kind of allow other people to experience these stories and fall in love with these characters is awesome. And it's so dope for people who haven't played the game to continue to see what happens to Ellie and Joel after he swore to her that he was telling her the truth.
Yeah, I think that's the most refreshing part about seeing this adaptation from the video games into this TV series, is to understand how it's not driven by this desire for it to be the exact same. It's driven by the desire of wanting to tell this story in a new medium with all the loving callbacks to the video game for people to know. And as you said, like, what was so great about season one is how much it really did bring in a new audience that hadn't played the video game but were very familiar maybe with the title or just even the genre of like post-apocalyptic zombie esque sort of storytelling. It brought in a wealth of people and a wealth of fans, and I think that's they set the tone with that first season and really have established themselves as to they can have fun and have liberties with how they tell this story in television because it is a new medium.
Yeah, and speaking of adaptations, obviously this has been quite an interesting time for video game adaptations. We're literally talking about
Mhm.
this as I've been seeing reviews for the Minecraft movie not doing the greatest, and Borderlands wasn't that great, but we had obviously The Last of Us season 1, but also Fallout and Arcane and all these amazing sort of adaptations from the games. I think the number one thing that I'm noticing, and it's true for this season of The Last of Us as well, is intention. And the fact that this story and the people behind it have the same intention it speaks volumes
Mhm.
for the way that we move from medium to medium. And so I think that's what I'm noticing is the most important part. But we've been given all 7 episodes of The Last of Us season 2. We would have loved to have done a watch club for season 2 like we did for season 1, but we are just simply too busy preparing for our trip to Japan to cover Star Wars Celebration. But fear not, we will be dropping a spoiler-filled discussion when the finale for this season drops on May 25th. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I'm excited to get really deep into the nitty-gritty of the individual moments that we got to experience together watching this show. But for now, we're going to stick to spoiler-free, completely spoiler-free stuff, to the point where we were having like a brief discussion prior to this recording about things that we could or couldn't say, and I'm like, really, we can't talk about? No, but we can't.
I'm just saying
um
I'm just saying we shouldn't talk about it, and that
yes.
it really does create it. This is one of those shows, and for the fans of season one and for the fans of the game, I think that
Yeah.
it has that precedence of wanting to be an experience, because as we will discuss, just because you played the game doesn't mean you know everything,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know stuff, but like this is an adaptation, and I think that's what's really refreshing about this season.
Yeah. Let me get to the synopsis for this season. 5 years after the events of the first season, Joel and Ellie are drawn into conflict with each other and a world even more dangerous and unpredictable than the one they left behind. Season 2 stars returning cast Pedro Pascal, Bella Ramsey, Gabriel Luna, and Rutina Wesley, and they're joined this season by new cast members including Caitlin Dever, Isabella Merced, Young Mazzino, Ariella Barrer, Tati Gabrielle, Spencer Lord, Danny Ramirez, Jeffrey Wright, and our beloved Canadian queen, Catherine O'Hara. The series is written and executive produced by Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, and season 2 of The Last of Us will debut on Max, HBO, and Crave on April 13th at 9 p.m. Eastern, with a new episode each week until its finale on May 25th. So, with all that out of the way, let's get into this show. I think when we're talking about adaptations, and I know we talked about this a lot in season 1, this will probably feel, if you've listened to our thoughts on season 1, like a bit more of a continuation on those thoughts. But I think we should really talk about the look and feel of this adaptation. I think Neil Druckmann working alongside the DOP from season 1, Ksenia Sarita. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I think they just do such a good job at getting the feel of the game. The amount of oh wow moments that capture the settings and the moments and the sort of the literally the screenshots that I remember taking playing the game. It's incredible, and I just think they do such a good job with lighting and set decoration that it's just so much fun to sort of pick out and see again, it's kind of just bringing me back to those moments that I played through.
Yeah, I think again this the show adopts the game's cinematic language. We learned that from the first season in a lot of ways, right?
Hmm.
All those really close up emotional shots that long takes, even the camera is handheld and sometimes to evoke intimacy. But even from the gameplay, from the actual gameplay and moments from the game and how they frame it and they give these callbacks to those people. And we talked about it in season one. It's like it's a like if kind of thing. It's not
Hmm.
like a so in your face, right?
Yep.
um and I think that that's what works really well. And the visual tone, the atmosphere, it's the same gritty tone that we know and love from the first season, from the video games. It has a very grounded aesthetic. The lighting, like you said, is incredibly moody and just heavy use of shadows and playing with light and darkness in so many interesting ways. But then the world itself, overcast skies and desaturated at times color palettes, but it's that post-apocalyptic setting that just feels so lived in and so real. And it's funny we're talking about it as for a TV show, but that doesn't seem like it's news for a TV show to be that committed to the craft of building it. But in relation to the video game, which did at times just feel like mesmerizingly real, yeah, I think it's really incredible to see how you get this like beautiful aesthetic of nature reclaiming urban spaces. And you have this idea of them wanting to faithfully recreate moments from the game and looks from the game with the attention to details in the environment, whether it be graffiti or notes or things scribbled on paper. It's just stuff that feels like it's like, again, if I feel like it's just so beautiful. And I think that those interiors often reflect that sort of scavenger, sort of survivalist mentality, just as much as the space feels, the environments outside of those houses and those internal interior spaces feel so open and vast. It's interesting how the interior of spaces can feel very claustrophobic and very at times almost even overwhelming, just
Hmm.
because there's such a survivalist mentality.
Well, I mean, in the game, it's in gameplay, it's referred to as world, or what is it? World storytelling, or storytelling like through exploration, right? And the way that they're able to capture that, like you said, in this show and just bring it forth is so much fun. And yeah, like little things. There's posters in Ellie's room that you're gonna catch, and little things like that. If you've played the game, again, as you said, if you know, you know. But I also think that there are some really I can't say specifically what, but there are a few moments where we see these beautiful, broken, dystopian wide shots that are slow and kind of ethereal at times. And like you said, it's post-apocalyptic. Nature has reclaimed the world over the past 26 years, and the way that they edit this to contrast between those moments to hard cutting right to a character that is in such a dark place and something terrible has happened to them, or just the way that they show the parallels between the broken world and the broken people that are living in it is so well done. And there are so many moments where I was just sort of like gasping. I was like pulled back by the choices that they made creatively. And like you said too, in terms of like how they're framing it like the game, like there are just moments where a character is like walking, and you and I literally would look to each other, and you'd be like, it's like playing a game. It's like we're playing the game right now. Like it's like basically the exact shot of following behind these characters walking down a road or something like that.
And I think that's the beauty of this show too, is how it integrates the game's mechanics into the storytelling, into the look and feel, right? It does it with purpose. I believe, as you said, intention. It has such intention with everything it's doing, and yeah, I think in a lot of ways the show's look and feel is so indicative of what the game brought, and is very much defined by the game, right? Like they're having liberties and they're having fun with it, but it's already sort of like a bit of mood board and bible for this show. They just have to bring it to life, and they do it in such an enriching way. And we were talking about it too, like in some moments when there's just a freeze frame and it's like a tree or like a sign. It's just like, it feels like those moments where you would just be press start, you know what I mean, like right before the
Yeah.
game, like when you're loading in and you hear that music, just the acoustic guitar, the strumming, and it's
Yeah.
like press start. Like it's almost like a visual chapter of where you are in the story. So I always thought that was really great. But you know what, the other thing that works really, really well for making this show feel super intense is the sound design and music. Like, first off, Gustavo, my God, like as much as the visuals are integral to the experience of the game, so too is Gustavo's music. And you can't have this show without his music. And I think his score just carries these moments in such a, it maintains the hauntingness, but it also just gives us a very minimal acoustic style that just underscores what's the emotional beats, and that comes from the game, and that comes in, it's leveraged so well in the show. And yeah, like the environmental sounds, like you had surround sound, right? Like, and I'm like turning, did you hear that? What is that? Did you hear that out there? I thought something was outside the window. And I think that's really great. The way they use that effect to really immerse the audience in the experience. It felt like just in the gameplay, because I had those moments when I was listening, when I had those like big PS3 surround sound headphones. I'd be like, what is happening behind me, right? It was really, really trippy. So yeah, sound design, just like you said, with the set design and everything that they've done, like it's just, there's that attention to detail. It's just, it really runs through why the show looks and feels the way it does.
Yeah, it's very intense visually, through the sound. There are so many times where I was lucky enough to get to see Justin completely scared out of his mind and closing his eyes and telling me, being like, "Tell me when there's no more clickers on the screen." And
I didn't
but
ask you that. I
yep,
was
yeah,
doing
he
the
was,
blind shade
yeah.
thing, and then I would be like, okay, I just don't like the jump scares. I don't like the jump scares. Once
I
the
know
jump
you don't
scare
like the
happens,
jump scares. I
it's
understand. I get it,
it's done.
Justin.
I think it's cheap thrills, the jump scares. Okay, come on.
But I think the way that they manage dread through that slow build up is so
Yes,
good in this show.
that's
And
I think that's also like the beauty of what this show does do, and how it treats horror. I think the game probably leaned more into like a jump scare mentality, but this show doesn't really do that. And I don't think it
Mhm.
ever really did, even from season 1. Like there were just things that would happen even like in season 1, like it would just happen in the frame, in the out of focus, that was creepy. Do you know what I mean? Like
Sure.
you think about
And they
episode 1 with the old
definitely
woman.
bring that back this
Oh, they
season for
definitely bring
sure.
that, and I
Yeah.
think that's the beauty of it. It's not actually leaning into like, let's do jump scares to scare people, because that is cheap thrills, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's draw out the tension, let's draw out the dread, let's make them be like a wussy in a chair, like wanting to not look. I don't want to look. I don't want to be. Okay, that's what it is, right? Like it's
Yeah. But I think the cool thing with this season is you are going to get to see how the clickers have maybe adapted and changed over the years,
Mm,
which is creepy and horrifying. And as much as Ellie and Dina are more adept to taking them on, I think they let's just say they make some unsettling discoveries along the way. But you brought up the music, and I think the Gustavo Santaolalla's score is always going to be phenomenal. But I think we 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 get to explore some of the themes from part 2 in this, and I think the focus that it brings to the characters is really good. I think there are times. I think the biggest thing with the score in any, especially TV show, I find it's like it really needs to stand out when it needs to stand out, and it needs to take the backseat when it needs to.
100%.
And I think he has such a good way with, like you said, that minimalist guitar to be able to do that. That again was highlighted in the game. But I also want to shout out that music is such an important part of this season, in
Mhm.
particular, and you're going to get to see characters actually experiencing and expressing through music. And there's some really, really beautiful moments. And there is a very specific vocal performance that when it hits, those, like you said, those who know will know. And I think it's such a perfect blend of the game and the show, and I'm really it's beautiful, it's sad, it's excellent. I do, just before we move on from look and feel, I also want to just shout out how much you and I were laughing this season, more than last season, and more than you would think for a show with this subject matter. Like, the show is dark, and it is this season is, I think, darker than last season. Um, but there are also some moments of levity, and Joel never got to have a teenage daughter, right? Sarah died when she was 12, and so you can imagine there's some elements between those two characters that we get to experience that had you and I at times like cackling, which I I was surprised by. I was not expecting that, because as funny as some of the lines are and some of the moments between Ellie and Dina are and Jesse are in the game, they're for some reason I found them to be a lot funnier in this show, and
Well,
it
because
really
it's
works.
it's it's an actual TV show. I think, like,
Sure,
again, like, you're reading people's natural body language versus, what was probably either
through performance capture.
performance capture,
Sure.
whether it's done actually together. Like, I'm sure in some cases it obviously is, where two people are acting off of each other and they do their voice recording 100%. We know that
For
that
the for
happens.
both games it was, yes.
Right. So then,
Yeah,
again, like, it's more or less this idea of, like, how does that translate when then animated, right? I
sure.
think, again, the dynamic of what this show brings in terms of elevating and differentiating itself from the video game is
Mhm.
is sort of the highlight of how to do adaptation properly. Do you know what I mean? How to
Yeah.
embrace what and also take it in a new way, rather than feeling like, well, where we're coming from is a box that we need to live in. You don't have to. And I think that this show does that, right? And in its way of sort of demonstrating these these moments where it can actually leverage humor, make your audience relate to some of these characters. Like, I think I related to Joel and just the fear of having a teenage daughter.
Yeah,
You know what I
you
mean?
literally
And, like,
turned to me at one point and went, I'm not looking forward to having a teenage daughter."
if that's what it's like, for sure. But
Sure,
again,
yeah.
there's a lot of stresses in their life. They're trying not to die.
Hopefully, we don't
Um,
have to experience,
no,
yeah.
exactly, yeah. But I think at the end of the day, humor is such a in such a in a narrative like this, it's sort of dark humor at times too, right?
Yeah,
And it has to be, right, because you can't really have, like, there's people that are trying to be happy, but, like, it's just, you can't have you have to have a sort of cynical outlook on the world because of the situation. So I think they capture the humor in the right capacities and leverage it so that it feels more real to the situations, rather than it just being, like, funny for the sake of it.
no, for sure, and I think it's important to have that, and I think the characters that we're gonna maybe highlight, talking about the performances, because I think a big part of that has to do with these performances. So let's talk about this cast, and of course, Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey returning as Joel and Ellie. Justin, let's get into it. What did you think of them in this season, and how that differs from season one?
Yeah, I feel like with Pedro and Bella, they're just putting on a masterclass of just comfort with these characters.
Hmm.
Both in the individual capacities when they're not together, but when they're together, you can see that sense of partnership in the way they act off of each other and really understand, I think, such a authentic way of how each other work to make these scenes feel so believable. And as individuals, I think, Pedro really brings a sense of vulnerability that feels layered. I think the moments that he doesn't speak volumes in
Yeah,
so many ways. And I think
yeah,
in season two, this is you seeing a more tendered, a more broken father figure. And I think that just contrasts where we left, or the last moments we saw Joel, in a
yeah.
lot of ways. And I think this season is very much a reflection on what the decisions he's made. And I think for even someone like, Ellie and Bella Ramsey, she just brings such a, like, authenticity to her performance. Again, like, just how believable she is, how natural the humor is, how natural the aggression is. And, there's just this beauty of being a character like that, that feels young, precocious. She just very much is looking at the world through the lens of wanting to understand it, even in the darkest of times of what things are going on. But they both just brought such like elevated performances. But the groundwork was established in season 1, and in season 2 it is significantly elevated, and a lot of that has to do as well with just the surrounding cast that they have to interact with. They help our characters discover more about themselves, while we as an audience member get to discover more about these characters, about Joel and Ellie, and who they are and where they are at this point. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean where they are is Jackson, and for a good part of this season, I think we get to see sides of them that we got in the video game. There are so many moments in a video game where you get to spend time with a character as you're walking from one point to another, so you get to flesh out some of these. But to get to see certain sides of these characters that we maybe didn't even get in the game in Jackson, and especially for folks who never played the games coming from season 1, it's really interesting because, like you said, we get to see at times them be comfortable with where they are, right? We
Mm-hmm.
get to see them in a headspace where things are not okay, but they're kind of okay, and so it's kind of okay, and everyone's just kind of being okay. And that's such a different tone, I think, for a big portion of this season in comparison to season 1. And I think the other kind of neat thing too is there's so many wonderful lovely moments that if you've played the games that you'll be anticipating. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, how we've seen how Pedro and Bella can pull off those moments from season 1. How are they going to pull off these huge moments for me where I'm getting giddy, I'm getting excited to see how they're going to do it, especially the moments where it is lovely between them. They just deliver so well, and I think it's like you said. I think it's their chemistry with each other, and their chemistry with like these characters and their relationship to these characters. There are at least 2 or 3 moments with them either together or with other characters where, like you said, they're putting on a clinic. They are acting their asses off, and they will bring you to tears this season. I want to just highlight the fact that at least until the end of season 1, both Joel and Ellie were pretty much characters that you could fully be on board with and root for. And this season, it's going to be different for you. You're going to find that you're not going to fully agree with these characters and their decisions. And I think for actors to be able to pull off that delicate balance of making a character not, still you love them and you want to root for them, but they also challenge you in different ways as well, it's not an easy task. And so for both Pedro and Bella to do such an excellent job at giving those honest performances, I think it's just really special. And I think this show and this season, I think they deserve all the accolades. But you mentioned that our experience with them is made even better by the characters that surround them. All of these characters are flawed characters, but they're so wonderful to explore and explore more. Who else did you want to highlight, Justin?
Well, I think obviously, like it kind of goes hand in hand with our main characters. So on Ellie's side, I definitely want to shout out Dina, played by Isabella Merced. I think she delivers a knockout performance in this season.
Mm-hmm.
She's again just I think she knew how to adapt with what Pedro and Bella were doing, and she brought that level of authenticity. She has her own chemistry with Bella that feels so inherently natural and just real. And the character of Dina she's just so much more than a girlfriend figure, if you will. Like she challenges Ellie in ways, and I think offers um at times a moral counterweight to Ellie's emotions, but can also validate where Ellie's coming from at times. And I think that
Yeah.
that's, like you said, like it's that delicate balance of being able to lean into both. And I think it's also just the messiness of it, right? Like the messiness of the whole situation. But yeah, like she did so well, and she was such a standout in this season.
Yeah, and I think she's Dina is such a go-getter, right? And she's a flirt, and she knows what she wants, and she goes for it. And it's great to see, like you said, the chemistry she has with Bella, the chemistry she has with every character in this show is fantastic coming from her side. And I
Mhm.
think it's cool because we do get to see some character pairings that we didn't get in the game. And so it's really cool to kind of explore those characters in that way. She's also able to hold her own, like you said, like she's challenging Ellie, but at the same time, like when we talk about the comedy in this show and the dark comedy and the quips, she is delivering those just as much as Bella Ramsey. And so I think it's lovely to see just how comfortable they are together, and to the point where we see them encountering certain situations and they can communicate without even speaking in some instances. And it's fully believable. I believe that these two have a friendship and a relationship that they have. And I think on the other side of that, we've got someone like Jesse, played by young Mazzino, who,
Mhm.
if you've not watched Beef, go watch Beef because he's awesome in Beef. But but when I heard he was up for the role, I was like, yes, that is absolutely spectacular. He's perfect for Jesse, because Jesse, on the other side of Dina, represents kind of the opposite, right? He's cautious. He
Mhm.
he doesn't want to go for what he wants. He wants to look out for his community, the greater good. And I think young Mazzino captures that energy so perfectly when he's never too loud, but when he needs to chime in because it's the right thing to do, he chimes in, and he's such a great addition to this cast.
Yeah, he definitely, like, he's the one who puts others' needs before his, like you said, and I think his dynamic with Ellie and Dina just adds an emotional layer to the whole trio interaction, and I think in a lot of ways, you see how Dina is with Ellie, and you also get to see moments where how Jesse and Ellie are together,
Hmm.
and it's really interesting to see how, uh Dina and Jesse often are very opposite in their views and how they reinforce or validate or push Ellie in other ways. So that's why I was saying off the top, it's like you're getting to see more about Ellie through her interactions with Jesse and Dina and how it shapes her and what influences they have on her and have had on her overall. And I think that that's super integral in terms of just creating a more enriching back history for the character that, again, a video game can talk about but doesn't really get to show at this level with performative quality like we're getting.
Well, and speaking of characters pushing other characters, um, we have that for Joel in this season. Catherine O'Hara, who plays Gail
Love her.
Linden, our Canadian
Fantastic.
queen. Justin, you were popping off pretty much every scene she was in. What did you think of Catherine O'Hara in season 2?
Well, right now, Catherine O'Hara is killing it. She's going to be in The Last of Us Part 2 or Season 2. And she's already in an amazing show called The Studio on Apple TV.
Oh my
And
gosh, yeah.
she's just, she is perfection in all ways. And I think what's really great is that, for someone like Catherine O'Hara, who's embraced comedy in so many different ways that can often be a little sketchy and like slapsticky maybe to a certain degree or overperformed, she is so incredibly natural and
Yeah.
so incredibly real in this show and in the studio, but we'll talk about this show. There's just an authenticity to her again, and I think that that's what the show is really all about, is everyone feeling real. You can relate to them, you understand them. And that's not to say that Catherine O'Hara isn't funny. She is hilarious. A lot of the humorous moments come from her and her sense of just reality with the situation, right?
Yeah.
And I
And
think
knocking some reality into
other
characters like
people,
Joel and other
exactly,
people. Yes. Yeah.
exactly, yes, and
Yeah.
and I think the people around her, and I think in a lot of ways, that's needed. That sense of reminder of again, as we were saying, it's sort of a cynical outlook on the future, but it's also very real. And I think it's yeah, she's just great. I'm so glad more Catherine O'Hara and anything. And yeah, I think just let's get more of that Canadian goodness, because like she's phenomenal in the show.
Well, and I think we talked about Dina and Jesse kind of being the pushes on both sides for Ellie, and that very much is in the game. Joel does have Tommy, and I do think getting more of Gabriel Luna
Yes.
is great in this show, and he's excellent as Tommy. But I do think that Catherine O'Hara and her role as Gail to sort of speed along discussions of what these characters are feeling. She's a psychiatrist, and so it's actually really refreshing coming from the games and knowing how long some of that stuff can take because you have that amount of time in a video game. Here, they're able to expedite it without going the route of cheesy exposition. They can go through it by just having these characters actually talking about what they're feeling, and it's really impressive from a writing standpoint, but from a performative standpoint, and the way that she delivers her dialogue is so snappy and quick. And she, yeah, like you said, she is downright funny in some of these moments. And she gives a couple of monologues that will take your breath away.
And like to go with that notion of just that balance in her craft, right? Like she's sharp with her comedy, and it's not like she's trying to be funny. You know what I mean? Like she's not trying to be funny in those moments. She's just, her delivery is sharp and it makes you laugh. But then
Yeah,
she has these incredible moments with these deep monologues that make you think about your own life, and it's just like, damn. Like,
it's
hey, so
crazy.
to balance that in a performance is like, hats off to Catherine O'Hara, man. She still got it.
But I mean, we also have to mention Jeffrey Wright is in this show. If you're familiar with the game, he plays the character of Isaac. There's not a ton that I feel too comfortable saying on a spoiler-free capacity about him, but he is magnetic on screen. His voice is incredible, and there's a reason that he was Isaac in the game and he's Isaac in the show. I don't think anyone else could pull off this character. He has this sense of calculated terror that he brings with his performance in his voice and his body language, and I'm so happy that they decided to bring him back for this role.
Yeah, I think the thing about Jeffrey that always, you know, you always are going to get when you have him in a movie or a TV show, is that he commands the screen. There is a presence that he brings to his roles, and this is no different. And I think, like many of the characters in The Last of Us, I think Isaac, not knowing much about him, just feels like the necessary evil that needs to be there. And I think, yes, he's very calculated. He has intentions. I feel like we have yet to see more of the sort of how brutal he could probably be. But that said, with what we did get of him, I think I'm very interested. I'm very interested. Like you said,
He's
I
a
can't.
knockout. He's
Yeah,
a
I can't say
knockout.
much. I can't say
It's
much, but like,
crazy.
it does make a lot of sense that they would bring him back from the
Yeah.
video game into the show because he's just incredible.
Now, somebody who was in a Naughty Dog video game, I won't spoil who she plays if you haven't played the Uncharted series. It's just a spoiler for literally the end of the last Uncharted game. But Caitlin Dever is here as Abby. And she's giving us this performance that's on the on the other side of things, where she is obsessed, she's mourning, she's relentless, and I think Caitlin Dever embodies Abby so well. I think there was some trepidations, just like there was when Bella was cast as Ellie, where people said, I don't know if that fully fits the mold. And I will tell you, the moment you get some of these sequences with Abby on screen, flies right out the window. There is
Sure.
nothing in my mind that tells me that she's not going to continue to be such a phenomenal character for this show. And Caitlin just does such a good job. I'm excited to see what we get from her in the future.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I think the one thing that was so incredible about Caitlin's performance is just how the emotion sat with her. I think she just brings such a range to understanding Abby's emotional, almost her emotional contradictions. You know what I mean? Like how she wants to do what's right, but then she's just consumed by so much.
Yeah,
And I think also, given the fact that she has more of a military sort of presence to her, and I think that like she's hardened by her duty, but she's softened by what's consuming her. And I think that it's an interesting contradiction in terms of how Caitlin brings that to life
Hmm.
in her performance. But the thing that really stood out to me, and again, like you mentioned, I haven't played the game through entirely. I've been introduced to most of these characters, not all of them, but I feel like even just understanding the point of view, it's like Abby's not a villain, really. You know what I mean? Like I think
Yeah.
in many ways she's a mirror to that of Ellie, and I think
Hmm.
her arc is very similar to Ellie's forgiveness, lost forgiveness, and just the idea of redemption. And I think that the interesting part is how the show tries to humanize a lot of these moments for these characters through its method of storytelling. Again,
Sure.
that's vague in the sense of me trying not to be spoilery with anything. But again, if you've played the game and you probably know what I'm talking about, but just this idea of how you know we are shaped by what we remember and our memories and so on and so forth. Very Severance as well too in that vein, right? Of
Hmm.
how we can be shaped by that. But yeah, I'm interested to see more of her character.
Well, I think we're trying to talk about this show without talking in spoilers about the story, but I do want to just bring up the concepts of the story and the adaptation.
Mhm.
And I think this season, like we've been sort of discussing throughout, it's great how we're getting different moments throughout that I think even though this show does sort of um, jump around from moment to moment, it still feels like I think season one felt a little more um, I don't know, just more like a linear path, whereas this feels more like a TV show because we're more comfortable with these characters. The characters are more comfortable with their surroundings, and so I think it kind of feels like we get to explore different elements. Again, as I said, we're in Jackson, so that feeling that you had when we got to be in Jackson in season one, imagine just maybe a little bit more of that, and we still, we get away from some of the always on alert journey of Joel and Ellie, and we get to sort of spend a little bit more time. And that's not to say that this show doesn't get dark and scary and intense, because it certainly does. Justin was constantly covering his eyes pretty much the entire time when he was scared. But I think we get to see again. We get to see these characters growing and having those conversations, maybe even a little bit more than we did in season one.
Yeah, that is, but that is what that's what part one is to part two, right? Like
Sure.
part one to The Last of Us part one was a very linear story. It was just get from here, go to there, and you learn more about these characters on the entire way. The wolf and the cub story, that mentality of a very focused character journey. That was part one. This is part two, where they are trying to elevate and bring in more people and bring in the dynamic. And I totally agree. I think this season feels more like a television show because of maybe how we're moving through the narrative in so
Hmm.
many ways. But like we were talking about already before, like the way that this show takes adaptation and takes the story of this game and does its own sort of spin on it. I think that's going to really catch people off guard and make people pretty surprised, and I'm excited for that because again, I think it proves that your I guess your origin, which would be the video game to this television show, doesn't need to be what you're bound to. You can take the best parts of it and bring that forward into a new medium. And I think season one did that really well. Like I think I was actually kind of maybe a little bit, like, it's too samey, like part one of The Last of Us, because even at the beginning of season one of The Last of Us, they were doing things a little bit different with some cold opens, and they were building out the world, and then they kind of just let that fizzled out. They didn't really do anything with that, right? Like they just kind of let go of that, and then it just sort of really became the game, and it just
Yeah,
hit
I
some
think
of those.
after the Bill and Frank moment
For
that was
sure,
so
yeah.
different,
Yes, that
right?
was so
It
different.
it
Yeah,
very much
it just
kind of
followed
led to
that
that.
linear. So those first
Mhm.
3 episodes really did set a tone for saying like, "Hey, we're gonna do something different," but, it felt like they kind of fell into being like the game after that. But here, it does feel like they are having liberty with shifting things around from the order in which they happen, because it's now they've established the character. They used the game one as the origin story of like, let's recreate this this experience to a certain degree, but really give a character focused journey on it, and through this medium. And then now in season 2, let's just throw it up in the air. Let's see what we can do, and how we can keep things that really work, and maybe adapt other things because it makes sense for the narrative of the television show, which I think is just so smart. Like, again, like you said, it's intention. It's having that intention and saying, you know what, we're going to do it this way. That means a lot.
And I think the other interesting thing is going to be the pacing. Watching this show, there were so many times where I very much was trying to put myself in the headspace of somebody who hadn't played the games, and approach my criticism in both manners. And I think the pacing is going to be really interesting, because I think for somebody who has experienced the game and is very familiar with the main beats of the game, it might feel like the show is a little fast. But for people who haven't, I feel like it might feel like it's slower than season 1. And that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. I'm intrigued to see how audiences are going to experience this and take it in. And I think this season, to set an expectation in terms of pacing, very much feels like The Last of Us Part 2, Part 1. It's already been announced and established that, yes, we're going to be getting more of The Last of Us after this season. So just keep that in mind. But I think the biggest point that I would like to get across, as again, approaching it from the side of the gamer, is that, like, this is purposeful. This isn't The Lion King, right? This isn't like a shot for shot remake. There is so many reasons to enjoy this version of the story, even if you played through the game multiple times. I think that criticism of the first season is a little warranted. And I as much as I think you and I both came out on the other side of being like, we loved how much it was like the first game, directly. But I think the way that they're changing the narrative in ways that matter this season, they push for a little bit more. They give you context that is going to make you so happy if you're so familiar with these characters, and the subtle changes they make, and even just highlighting characters that maybe didn't even get as much of a story, or sort of a narrative, or just character in the game. You get that in this show, and I just think it makes for a different deep dive into their lives that are going to give you more context as to who these people are. And
Yeah.
we were experiencing some moments, and Justin, I know you could tell, where I sort of would have this like feeling of like, okay, we're getting to this. We're getting to this part. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. And I might have even just said that out loud a few times. But I think I think it
Numerous times.
changed. Yes, but I think it changed. Like, I think the anticipation of the experiences that I've had before changed how I experienced the story in positive ways. And it didn't feel like, oh my gosh, when are we going to get to this? It wasn't distracting, but it was always just sort of refreshing. Again, the closest thing I can equate it to is just the experience of, you've watched a movie and now you're watching it again, and you're getting so much more out of it than you did before. And you're very much going to get that with season 2 of The Last of Us.
Sure. Yeah, I, I
Yeah.
think I think that's a valid point. And I think, again, coming from the gamer perspective, it totally makes sense. I think for those who may not have played the game, I think you might be right. Like, there could be a pacing issue there where it might feel a little slow, but it's only 7 episodes. Everything you're experiencing is earned. There is a gratification to the experience of watching this show that feels so enriching to what can be a season 3. And like you said, it's been pretty well known that there's going to be a season 3. But I don't know if this is as well known, but the fact that Neil Druckmann, and I think Craig as well, Mazin, has said, like, this part 2 game is going to be spread over 2 seasons of this show. And I think that should also inform some of those gamers that might be not aware of that, or some of these people who are aware of the game and haven't played it, to understand that there is a part that's still missing from
Yes.
this season, that
Especially as we
still
get to
needs
the
to be.
later part of the season, I think you and I
Absolutely.
were both commenting on there might be moments where people feel like stuff is missing, and I was hinting at things towards you to try and nod like, okay, yes, yeah, that very much
Right.
is it, but
So
yes,
don't watch
if
this
you're
with
feeling
someone
that way,
that's played the game, because they'll definitely point those things out. I'm just saying though, in the grand scheme of things, that's going to affect that pacing too, and it's also going to affect how information is given to us. It might feel sort of fragmented. It might feel like some
hmm
episodes move a little bit faster and there's pieces missing,
but it's
and
purposeful.
it's all purposeful. And I think that's where it could be a little bit of a disjointed experience for some people, if
Yeah.
I was going to be completely honest. So yeah, I think that's where this story might struggle a little bit, but it doesn't take away from everything else in terms of how you experience it.
Well, before we get to our final score for season two, I want to get a little hyped here. I want to
Mhm.
get a little bit like, what are you excited for people to see? We already kind of talked about it a little bit. Is there a specific episode that maybe was your favorite that you are so stoked for people to see?
It's a toss up between episode 2 and episode 6 for
It's
me.
literally what I
Episode
wrote.
Yeah, episode 2 and
Yeah,
episode 6 are probably like some of the best television, and for different reasons. I
yeah.
think, episode 2 is just like a, "Yeah, we're back." And, I think episode 6 is, without giving anything away, obviously, for any of it, it is just it's the most well-earned episode of television. Um, I
Mm.
feel like in that, and I mean by what I mean by earned is like you've invested the time to watch these characters and watch this world. I feel like that episode really means a lot.
They
Uh,
reward you.
they reward you, and
Yeah,
they give you something that is just it's really worth it all. And I
yeah.
think that's great. And I think again, it's probably it's so much like the Bill and Frank episode, which was about humanity and love in such a dark time. That is what episode 6 is for season
Mm.
2. It is about humanity, it's about love, it's about this intention about, how you keep those people close in such a weird fucked up time when you're just trying to stay alive. And yeah, it's beautiful. So yeah, I think
Yeah,
those two are it's a toss up between those two. I guess it's probably going to be 6 though. That's going to be my favorite. But
sure.
yeah.
I'll go with episode two then. I think there it's we talk about the idea of like a snowball, and very much it is a snowball in a few different ways, but in the sense that it starts off a bit slow and it slowly starts to creep and get heavier and heavier and more intense to the point where like you and I were like I could feel your heart beating from across the couch. Like it
I
was
was tense.
crazy.
Yeah, I was
Uh
tense. Like, and like definitely like yeah, it was a tense episode for sure.
Yeah, and we sort of let's just say it gets to a grand scale way quicker than I was anticipating only being the second episode. So, really great action moments in the episode. I cannot wait to see what people think of it, people who've played the game, people who haven't, because again, the way that they are making changes to the show, uh, it's again, it's so rewarding and it's so great to get to experience this story again, and maybe for the first time. So let's get to our final
Mhm.
score, which we're going to be rating this season on a scale of 1 to 5 promises.
Awesome. Well, yeah, season 2 of The Last of Us is like undeniably it's just great television. It's cinematically rich, it's emotionally gripping and visually stunning, and that's just building like off of the tone and aesthetic of the first season. It's just all dialed up for season 2. And I think the look and feel of the shows we were talking about, just it feels so faithful to the games, and that world. It's, so it just feels lived in so many ways, and so much of a reminder of where these beautiful images come from, right? It's just such a great marriage of how they've been able to translate the medium, translate the look of the game into the medium of television. And I think, it's more ambitious. It's also very striking in terms of how it plays with lighting and so on and so forth. I think this season, though, obviously the addition of new characters and just the cast, it just deepens the emotional stakes of the overall season, while also broadening the narrative scope for individual characters. I think that's really what it does well. And I think while serving to challenge and involving like Joel and Ellie in some really meaningful ways, I think this narrative is overall is definitely taking different liberties with the original game, and I think that that's great. I think that's, again, proving what can be done with adaptation. But because there's these gaps that feel intentional, it feels like there's stuff just missing from this season that can only be made better by a season 3. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
it just feels like I need to see season 3 to really appreciate season 2. Not to say that there's not episodes that really do stand out. Like I said, episode 6 is fantastic, but yeah, I feel like with season 3 coming out at some point, I feel like this is going to make season 2 even stronger. So for that reason, I'm gonna be giving this a 4 out of 5 promises. I
Okay.
think I think it's still a great it's still great television. And I'm pretty sure I gave season 1 a 4 out of 5 as well.
Really?
Like you said, Nate, it's all done with intention. They purposely kept season 1 to feel like the game because it's such a staple in terms of establishing Joel and Ellie. This season is about evolving them with additional characters and evolving their relationship, and it does that really really well. But we need a season 3 to kind of fill in some of these gaps. I was just gonna say. So
No, I
that
appreciate that.
I feel like it's still great television. But yeah, 4 out of 5
Okay.
promises.
Yeah. I mean, I think this season, like we've been saying, I think it continues to bring that story that originally challenged me in ways that I really appreciated back in 2020 with the game. And I think it continues to, like you're saying, evolve the characters, but also give you sides of these characters that you might not necessarily root for. And I think that's so important. And I think we get to go to moments with these characters, like I've been saying, that had me smiling so much with surprises or revelations about them that we didn't get in the game, that deepened my
Yeah.
understanding of where they were coming from in that original story. This season is beautiful, it's joyful, it's tragic, it's dark, and I think, like the game, it's going to also challenge you on your views of, like you've been saying, justice, trauma, empathy, forgiveness. And I think no matter what you think of these characters and the decisions they make, you're going to be pretty hard pressed not to feel for them with how well this cast pulls off these incredible performances, which brought me to tears. I think I noticed. I think through you covering your eyes a little bit, I thought I saw you pushing a couple tears away. I don't
Oh, I
fully
definitely
remember.
cried. I definitely
Yeah.
cried in a couple episodes. So like
Okay.
I think I'm definitely like, mm, softened now.
Yeah.
Hang out with Nate enough, he'll soften you. You'll
Soften
just
right
cry.
up.
You'll just
Yeah.
cry. You'll just cry like
Just cry
jello.
together.
Um
But I, yeah. But I do think, like you were saying, I think the pacing is going to be really interesting to see how it's received week to week. We watch this over the course of 3 days, so it's a little different in terms of how we experienced
mhm.
it. I'm intrigued to see how people who, again, just like how I probably said in season 1, people who played the game versus people who didn't, to see what elements are caught in terms of what's missing versus what people maybe will criticize the show for. It's going to be really interesting. I think this season still, though, I think it begins to do justice to my favorite single player game of all time. But I think that's a key element there is that it begins to do that. However, I don't know if I can go down to a 4. I think
You
I'm
don't
gonna
have
go
to.
for
You're gonna go for a
okay.
5 out of 5. Yeah. You're
No,
gonna
no, 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 no. I'm gonna go for a 4.5 that,
Oh,
like the
okay. Yeah.
characters in this show and in the game, could evolve into a 5 out of 5 with season
Sure.
3, like you were
Sure,
saying.
sure,
But
sure.
I'm gonna go with a 4.5 out of 5 promises.
Mhm.
I
That
think
makes
that's
sense.
fair to say. But that is
Yeah.
it for our spoiler-free review for The Last of Us Season 2. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you'd like to share your thoughts on this series or any of the shows or movies we cover, well, let me just ask Justin to scout out a safe path for you to take so you can reach us without getting infected.
Well, they can reach us at wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. That's wearegeekcentric@gmail.com. Or they can reach out to us on Twitter at geekcentricyt or on Instagram at wearegeekcentric. Oh,
That's my clicker noise. Keep in mind, we have a ton of other great episodes covering the latest in movies and TV shows, including our recent spoiler-free reviews out now for the Apple TV Plus series The Studio, as well as Disney Snow White, Marvel Television's Daredevil Born Again, Pixar Animation Studios' original series Win or Lose, and Marvel Studios' Captain America Brave New World. Plus, we've got our spoiler-filled discussion out now for Severance Season 2 and its finale. And coming soon, we're going to have our spoiler-filled discussion for Daredevil Born Again when that finale drops next week. And as I mentioned, we will have a spoiler-filled discussion for this season, Season 2 of The Last of Us, when it drops next month, when the finale drops. We've also got some great interviews to check out, like our recent interviews with composers from the Yellow Jackets, Anna Warrenker and Craig Wedren. I had a great, wonderful, long-form conversation with them. And tomorrow, we've got even more composers joining us on the Geekcentric podcast with Daredevil Born Again composers, the Newton Brothers. Justin and I got to sit down with them and have a nice, beefy chat about this season and the music that they created for it. And coming soon, we've got yet another interview with the Doctor himself, Chudi Gatwa, for Doctor Who Season 2. But this time, we also spoke with his latest companion, Virata Setu, who joined us, and they talked about the music that they'd want to sneak onto the TARDIS, and Virata breaks down what she loves about both Whovians and Star Wars fans. So a bunch of fantastic interviews that you can check out either right here on your podcast service of choice or over on YouTube at youtube.com/geekcentric. We've got so much to look forward to. More interviews, more reviews. Again, we've got that spoiler cast for Daredevil Born Again Season 1 coming. We're going to have some coverage on Andor Season 2, and rightfully so, because the Force will be with us as Geekcentric is going to be traveling to Japan to cover all things Star Wars Celebration. We are so incredibly stoked. I can't wait. We're counting down the days. It's a great time to be Geekcentric, so be sure to subscribe and keep an eye on our socials to follow along with us every step of the way. Justin, thank you so much, as always, for surviving with me through this spoiler-free review. And as we say, love ya.
Peace.